written by pre-scientific nomads, and evolution is a proven scientific fact. Probably not the first things you'd expect to hear from me this morning, and neither of those statements is true, by the way. But if you'd been talking to a friend or a family member yesterday and about Jesus, and they'd said something like that to you, how would you have responded? Maybe one of your children or your grandchildren comes home from school with a book about dinosaurs, telling them that they died out 65 million years ago. Or you've got a workmate who tells you that they don't believe in the Bible because carbon dating proves that the Earth is billions of years old. And then there's the most asked question we get as a challenge to our faith and the nature of God. If God is a God of love, why does he allow all this bad stuff to happen in the world? Now, I've got to ask, has anybody here heard these sorts of challenges? If you have, can I get you to put your hand up and hold it up there? And then I want you to have a look around, because you are not the only person that's being asked these questions. Now, some of you, as I was going through those questions, you might have had a particular person in mind, maybe or people in mind, people that you might have been trying to reach with the gospel message. As I go through my talk, I just want you to keep those people in mind, okay? And just see how the information that we're able to provide you with might just make a difference in how they accept what you're talking to them about. Now, it's important that you understand what these challenges are. If you look at them closely, they're all actually attacks on the history recorded in the Bible, and in particular in the book of Genesis. But the underlying implication is very clear. If you can't explain the first book of the Bible, why would you expect them to believe what the rest of the Bible tells them about Jesus? Now, as you've heard, my name's Mark James. I have an honours degree in organic chemistry from Victoria University of Wellington, and some of you are looking at me right now thinking, "Ooh, that must have been a long time ago." And it was, and an awful lot has happened in the intervening years. Today, I like to refer to myself as a lapsed, long-age evolutionary atheist. If you told me 25 years ago that I'd be doing what I do today, I would probably have recommended some form of psychiatric intervention. So Creation Ministries is a ministry that's set up to support the church in proclaiming the gospel message by upholding the truth of the Word of God, especially where it comes under attack through the use, or I like to say through the misuse, of science. We believe that the Bible is the inspired, inerrant revelation of the Creator God of the universe. Our bottom line is that the proper interpretation of Scripture is to take it plainly. That is, we read it as the author, or authors, inspired by the Holy Spirit, intended it to be understood. Now, any expert in Hebrew grammar will tell you that Genesis is plainly written as historical narrative. So I have to believe that the Holy Spirit intends us to read it as historical narrative, which means the account of origins presented in Genesis is a simple but factual presentation of actual events. God created the universe and everything in it in 6 ordinary 24-hour Earth days. And then, based on the genealogies found in later chapters, coupled with some recorded dates in history, we can calculate that this happened around about 6,000 years ago. So today I'm here to talk to you about science and the Bible. But there's actually 3 main things I want to achieve in the next 40 or so minutes. Firstly, I want to encourage you in your own faith. I want you to understand that real science, properly interpreted, does not conflict with the biblical account. Knowing that the Bible can be trusted from the very first verse has had a profound influence on my own faith, and I pray that it will be the same for you today. And secondly, I want to encourage you in sharing your faith. I want you out there in the world boldly witnessing to your family, to your friends, to your workmates, confident in the knowledge that the Bible can be trusted from the very first verse. And then I want to equip you with information that will help you in your own faith and in sharing your faith. So what do I mean by this? In 1 Peter 3:15 we read, "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." Does this sound like a suggestion to anybody here? Because it's not. It's an instruction. We Christians are instructed to be prepared to share our faith. But to do this effectively, you'll need to be equipped with answers to the questions that unbelievers will ask. Now at CMI, we like to call ourselves an information ministry. And what do we do as an information ministry? We produce information. Probably the best information, the best resource. Actually, you know what? You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all those things that I don't really understand. But we also have an amazing website. I'm very biased, obviously, but this website now has more than 15,000 fully searchable articles on this topic, and a new article is added almost every single day. We regularly get testimonies from people whose lives have been changed because people like you have shared the information on this site. And best of all, the information available on this website is absolutely free. Can I get you to actually say the web address out loud? So 1, 2, 3, it's? Creation.com. You know what? It's been scientifically proven that you're more likely to remember that because you've said it out loud. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, oh no, not another website that you've got to follow. Well, just for you, we've come up with a very simple system that will alert you when there's something of particular interest on our site. We have a free email alert service. It's called InfoBytes, and it's designed to keep you up to date with important breaking news in this area. And it provides links to the related articles on our website. All you need is an email address. And if you have an email address, I would strongly recommend that you sign up for InfoBytes. We're not going to spam you, and you can always unsubscribe at a later date if you decide that it's not for you. And so I'm going to get my wonderful assistant, Tobias. I always decide, you know, when I come into the place, I look for the best looking bloke and get him to hand out the sign-up sheets. Sometimes people question my eyesight. All you need is an email address, as I said, just fill in your contact details in the spaces provided, and then please pass it on so that everybody gets a chance. While others are going around, I want to give you an example of why I believe that this is also very important. I have a question for you. Which of these two people do you think looks more comfortable? The guy with the umbrella, right? Why? Because he's covered, he's protected from the rain. Okay, so which of them do you think is more likely to have a successful day? Again, it's the guy with the umbrella. Why? Because he planned ahead. See, he's prepared for whatever the day might throw at him, and he's equipped to deal with it. We live in a world that is saturated with anti-biblical ideas. To be confident in our own faith, we need to protect ourselves from this deluge. We need to take every thought captive to obey Christ. And to boldly share our faith, we need to be prepared and equipped to answer the challenges that the enemy will throw at us. Today I'm going to give you an introduction to this topic. It's almost like an appetizer, but the main course really is in the resources that we produce. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the science. I have another question for you. Who do you think has the most scientific facts? Creationists or evolutionists? Who thinks creationists have the most scientific facts? There's a few hands going up there, okay. Who thinks evolutionists have the most scientific facts? You know, the interesting thing here is both sides of this debate actually have the same scientific facts. We all look at the same universe. It's the same rocks, the same fossils, the same plants, the same animals. Creationists and evolutionists don't disagree about the facts. We disagree about how the facts are interpreted. You see, facts exist in the present. They can be scientifically tested in the present, and these tests can be repeated to verify the results. We call this observational science. And observational science is responsible for our medicines, for my laptop, for your cell phones. In fact, all the technological advances we have today are a result of observational science. Observational science looks at the facts and how they fit together. But you see, things like the origin of the universe or the origin of life, these are historical events. They can't be tested and they can't be repeated. So this involves a different kind of science. Again, the scientists examine the facts that exist in the present, but this time the results are interpreted to try and work out how those facts came into existence. Now, we call this historical science. Historical science does play an important role in our understanding of past events, but it has one major limitation. See, to draw conclusions, scientists have to make assumptions. And these assumptions are often based on what the scientist believes about what's happened in the past to start with. Long-age geologists, for instance, they'll start by looking at the scientific facts, assuming that the processes we see happening today have happened throughout history. But can you see that by doing this, they automatically rule out the very possibility of a global flood before they even start looking at the facts? Now, I make assumptions too. Everybody has to. As a biblical creationist, my starting point for looking at the scientific facts is the Genesis account of creation. Please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Bible is a science textbook, because it's not. But it is the unchanging Word of God who cannot lie, which means it must be true in everything it teaches. And Jesus himself confirmed this when he prayed for his disciples. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word, the Bible, is truth. So whenever the Bible touches on matters that have scientific implications, it must be true. Otherwise, the skeptics are right and the Bible can't be trusted. Today, what I want to do is I want to look at a few of the more common scientific challenges to biblical authority. And I want to give you some answers that are easy to understand and easy to explain that you can use to convince people that the biblical account is correct. So first up, what about the geological features? Don't they take millions of years to form? What do you do if you get asked a question like this? I want you to get excited because you're going to have an opportunity to share the truth with somebody. So what are the facts? Without question, we find billions of dead things, we call them fossils, buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. Long ages, starting with the assumption that the earth is old, attribute these rock layers to gradual sedimentation over hundreds of millions of years. And in this account, the fossils supposedly record the sequence of biological evolution over time. But to a creationist like me, the rock layers are exactly what we would expect to find as a result of the flood of Noah. And in this case, the fossils record the sequence of burial during the flood. So, we've got facts, and we've got two different explanations for these facts. Let's see which of these explanations gives us the best understanding for what we see. First, we're going to take a look at the rocks. All over the world, we find strata like this, often tens, even hundreds of meters thick, consisting of layers of rock sitting one on top of the other, almost like pancakes. And these are not just localized features. We find layers like this that stretch all the way from the White Cliffs of Dover to the Middle East. The same layer, all the way. We find layers like this stretching for hundreds of thousands of square kilometers across North America. Now, long-age geologists would have us believe that these layers were laid down gradually, either at the bottom of lakes or tranquil seas, or as a result of multiple local floods over time. So let's test this. First, let's level these layers up. Now, this layer that I've highlighted at the bottom was supposedly laid down millions of years ago, and then over a long period of time it was buried and the next layer formed. But can you see that for some reason there's absolutely no sign of erosion while this process took place? See, the effects of water in particular should have caused channeling and unevenness in the upper surface of one layer while the next layer was laid down. But apparently every single one of these layers lay there perfectly flat for millions of years, and during that whole time there was absolutely no erosion. And then, once the layers were in place, two things happened. Firstly, the whole formation was tilted. Now we know that this tilting happened after the layers were in place, because if it had happened as the layers were being laid down, some of the upper layers would have been fat at one end and thin at the other, because that's what gravity does. It levels things off, right? And then, only then, did the erosion start. And it was huge. And not just down this red line that I've highlighted here. Can you see that the whole front of this cliff face has eroded away? I have to ask, does this long-age explanation make sense of what we see? Here's another one for you. Why is it that we only ever find soil on the top layer, but not between the layers lower down? See, soil is made from decomposing plant life. Was there no plant life for millions of years while these layers formed. This actually beggars belief. And to make matters worse for the long age believers, we actually find fossilized plant material in the rocks, but there's no soil for these plants to grow in, and there's no soil formed by the decomposition of these plants when they die. Okay, so these features I've shown you, and there are many more that I don't have time to go into today, they're exactly what we might expect to find if the layers were formed quickly by flowing water during the flood. And when you know what to look for, the evidence for the flood is everywhere. Anybody recognize this place? The Grand Canyon, yes? Has anybody been there? Quite a few of you. It's an amazing place. If you ever do get a chance to go there, grab it. There are hundreds of meters of sedimentary rock layers stacked one on top of the other. No soil formation between the layers, and erosion only from the top layer down. It's incredible. But there's something even more amazing about this part of the world. Scientists will now tell us that at some stage in the past, there was at least another 1.5 kilometers of rock standing on top of what's there today. That's above the rim of the canyon. As much as 400,000 cubic kilometers of rock has gone, and it's gone without trace. I have to ask, what could have caused erosion on such a massive scale? I was talking to an old friend of mine about this a while ago, and I got to the end there and I asked him that question, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "I wonder why the aliens mined all that dirt." It's amazing what people will believe rather than face the truth. The flood of Noah was a catastrophic event that inundated every square inch of land on this planet. The very highest mountains were covered to a depth of at least 6 meters. That's the pre-flood mountains, by the way. The Bible doesn't tell us how tall those mountains were. Huge volumes of churned up sediment would have been created. And as that sediment settled, different particle densities in flowing water would have resulted in layers forming rapidly, with no soil formation between the layers and no erosion between the layers. Then, as the flood waters abated and the mountains rose up, as the Bible tells us, these layers would have been subjected to enormous erosion, resulting in much of the topography that we see around us today. Now, these sediments would have contained minerals, biological agents, and of course water, exactly the ingredients required to rapidly cement the particles together to form rock. If you want to know how quickly solid rock can form under optimum conditions, you just have to look at concrete. It's a very similar process. How long does concrete take to go hard? Less than a day? And if you have any doubt at all that all the land we see around us was once covered by water, you just have to look at Mount Everest. The summit of the tallest mountain on Earth is made of sedimentary rock laid down in water. And right at the top of Mount Everest, those sedimentary layers contain fossilized shellfish. No disrespect to Sir Ed, but the clams got there first. So you can see that the biblical account provides a more coherent explanation for the rocks. But what about the fossils? See, fossils are the preserved remains or traces of plants, animals, and other organisms. They are actually a record of death. But fossilization is a very rare occurrence today. Why? Well, we know from observation that when something dies on land or in water, it doesn't lie there for thousands of years while it's gradually covered up with sediment. What happens? Usually scavengers will attack the carcass, won't they? And they'll start to pull it to pieces. And then microorganisms become involved, and they'll continue the process of disintegration until there's very little left. Would this result in the beautifully preserved fossils we find today? I'd like to suggest not likely. Fossilization, we know, requires rapid burial. A lot of sediment in a short space of time, either immediately after the death of the organism or causing the death of the organism. Only this type of rapid burial will seal the organism from scavengers and decay so that fossilization can take place. And today we find some amazing examples of fossils that can only be the result of this type of rapid burial. This is a picture of a female ichthyosaur. These are incredible creatures. It's an extinct sea creature. They were sort of like dolphins, but they were reptiles. I have to ask, how do we know it's a female? Is it the long eyelashes? No. The little handbag? No. We know that this is a female. We know that this is a female because it was buried and fossilized in the process of giving birth. Now, ladies, I know that labour can take a long time, but it doesn't usually take thousands of years, does it?
Feels like it.
And here's another of a fish fossilized in the process of swallowing its lunch. These are instants in time that have been recorded in the fossil record. And remember the shellfish I told you on the top of Mount Everest? What happens with shellfish when they die is the ligament that holds the shells together decomposes and the shells fall apart, which is why we find half shells on the beach, right? The clams on the top of Mount Everest are in the closed position, which means they must have been buried rapidly. Okay, so now we know that we need rapid burial to start the fossilization process. But everybody knows, I mean, we're told all the time that it takes a long time to turn something into a fossil. But actually, no, under the right conditions, it can happen very rapidly. This is a picture of a fossilized bowler's hat found in Tasmania. Now, I have to say, bowlers' hats and the bowlers who wear them aren't usually millions of years old, right? And there are many, many examples of this sort of recent rapid fossilization around the world, including teddy bears. This teddy bear has turned to stone. Are teddy bears millions of years old? Of course they're not. So contrary to what we're led to believe, the fossil record does not require slow and gradual processes over long periods of time. And again, an honest interpretation of the scientific evidence supports the biblical account. Okay, so let's move on to another question that we will have thrown at us. Isn't evolution a proven scientific fact? And doesn't that mean that the biblical account of creation must be wrong? You know what? If evolution is true, I would have to agree. It does prove the biblical account of creation wrong. Why? Well, evolutionists would have us believe that life started out as a single-celled organism and over the course of many millions of years has evolved to produce the huge variety and complexity of life as we know it. This is called biological evolution. According to the biblical account, however, all the different kinds of life we know today were created fully functioning over the course of 6 days during the creation week, approximately 6,000 years ago. Now, you have to understand that these two accounts are mutually exclusive. If one of them's true, the other one must be false. Why? Well, at the end of the creation week, God saw all that he had made and he declared it to be very good. In Hebrew, this is tov mi'od. It means perfection. It means a complete absence of evil of any kind. But if evolution is true, this very good creation must have been sitting on top of layers of rock containing fossils, recording millions of years of suffering, disease, and death. And apparently, God declared this to be very good. Is death good? No, death stinks. It's an intrusion into God's perfect world. Death is an enemy. In fact, the Bible tells us that death is the last enemy to be destroyed. When we see bad things happening, maybe a friend or a family member dies of cancer, or thousands of people are killed by a tsunami, this should be a reminder to us that there is something very wrong with creation. So, as you can see, there are major theological problems with the theory of evolution. And of course, there's a huge difference in how life as we know it came into existence. So again, we have facts. We're all here. We have facts. And we have two explanations for how these facts came into existence. So let's have a look at which explanation works best. According to Wikipedia, that fount of all knowledge, biological evolution is the change in the inherited characteristics of biological populations over time. Now we know from observational science that biological populations change over time. But is this really evolution? I want to look at a very simple example. According to the Bible, how many dogs did Noah have on the ark? 2? Okay, the Bible doesn't say that there were 2 dogs on the ark, but 2 dogs is a reasonable assumption because the Bible tells us 2 of every kind came to Noah to be kept alive. How many different breeds of dog do we have today? There are hundreds, right? So changes in the inherited characteristics of dogs must have happened even in the biblical account. In fact, this type of change is central to an understanding of biblical creation. So what's going on here? Well, the inherited characteristics of biological populations are stored and passed on from organism to organism by molecules in the cell called DNA. I'm sure you've all heard of DNA, yes? Our genes, which play an important role in defining our characteristics, are part of our DNA. Now, in this example I'm about to show you, which is taken from a magazine we produce called Creation Magazine, we're going to assume that hair length in dogs is governed by 1 pair of genes in the dog's DNA. Now, you can't usually see these genes on the front of a dog, all right? But for this example, you can see that these 2 dogs have 1 gene for short hair and 1 fluffy gene for long hair. When these dogs reproduce, the dog's DNA is copied, but each parent can only pass on 1 of these genes. So the offspring can be short-haired with 2 short-haired genes, medium-haired like the parents, and long-haired with 2 long-haired genes. But see, now let's see what happens if we put these dogs into a cold environment. Can you see the short and medium-haired dogs, they aren't so successful, and they're less likely to pass on their genes. The long-haired dogs, however, they thrive and they do pass on their genes, but they can only pass on the long-haired gene. So we end up with a population of dogs all with long hair. This is an example of what's called natural selection, sometimes called survival of the fittest. I'm sure you've heard those terms as well. The dogs best suited to their environment have survived to reproduce and pass on their genes. But what would happen now if the environment warmed up again? Can you see what we've done here? In just 2 generations, we've eliminated the gene for short hair. This is why the Wikipedia definition is so deceptive. Changes in the inherited characteristics of biological populations can and do happen over time, but only within kinds of organisms. We call this variation or speciation. These dogs, it's chatting to me. These dogs look very different from the original pair, but they're still dogs. Nothing new's been created, okay? They haven't developed gills to swim underwater or wings to fly. And the changes that are observed actually involve a loss of information. Biological evolution has to explain the arrival of new characteristics. And to get new characteristics, there has to be a change to the DNA. Now, changes to DNA are called mutations. Again, I'm sure you've heard that term before. Mutations are random copying errors that happen as the DNA is copied during reproduction. But DNA is the biological equivalent of a highly sophisticated software system. In fact, Bill Gates is on record as saying that DNA is the most sophisticated software system known to man. And new characteristics require the addition of new coherent information. And this is a major problem for evolution. According to the theory, life started out as a single-celled organism which has then evolved over time to produce human beings. A single-celled organism has DNA containing about 1 million, the easiest way to describe them is to call them chemical letters. Human cells have DNA with 3,000 million chemical letters, which means random copying errors have to explain the addition of some 2,999 million chemical letters, containing the information that codes for bone cells, muscle cells, heart, kidney, liver, all in the right place, and just as importantly, not in the wrong place. Do random mutations happen? Absolutely. Do they add information to DNA? No. By a wide margin, we know that random mutations actually destroy information in DNA. The stark reality is that no random mutation has ever been found that adds the complex coded information for brand new features to be added to an existing organism. Not one. Now, Evolutionists will dispute this, and they'll point to what they call beneficial mutations in support of their theory. But when we look at the biochemical pathways for those beneficial mutations, invariably they end up being caused by a loss of information. And you might be thinking, okay, how does a loss of information become a benefit to an organism? Well, again, I want to give you a silly example. I want you to imagine that I was born with a mutation that meant that I had no legs. Would we consider that to be an evolutionary advance? No, I've got no legs. But what if we lived in a world where athlete's foot was a terminal disease? Can you see that I've got no legs, which means that I've got no feet and no toes, which means I can't catch athlete's foot, whereas you lot with all those horrible feet and toes of yours would be susceptible to the disease? Can you see how a loss of information might cause a benefit in a certain situation? But when it comes time to race out and get something to eat after the service, who's going to struggle to get there? The guy with no legs. So what does this tell us about our origins? Well, according to the theory of evolution, random mutations have caused genetic information to gradually increase over time, starting in the distant past with the arrival of the first life form and culminating in life as we know it today. Evolution also predicts that we should see a continuation of this increase into the future. I mean, why would it have stopped now, just when we start looking at it? But if we take a closer look at what's happening today, what scientists actually observe is a relatively rapid loss of genetic information. Exactly the opposite of what we would expect to find if evolution were true. Now, this is not good news for life on this planet, and it's certainly not good news for the human race. As many as 100 to 300 extra mutations are added to every new individual at conception, and these mutations accumulate over time. At this rate, we as a species are rapidly heading for extinction. But now let's take what's observed in observational science and let's go back into history. If we do that, what we see is increasing genetic complexity, with each preceding generation having fewer mutations and more information in the DNA than the generation that comes after it. Your parents' DNA has fewer mutations than your DNA. Compared to your parents, you are all mutants, okay? And when I say mutants, think Quasimodo, not X-Men. You are not getting better. And your grandparents' DNA has fewer mutations than your parents' DNA. And this reduction in mutations and increase in genetic complexity stretches back into history. Go back the right number of generations, and there's the distinct possibility of arriving at a point where DNA carries no mutations. How would you describe DNA with no mutations? Genesis 1:31 tells us that at the end of the creation week, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. In other words, everything was created perfect. The Bible also tells us that since the fall, the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to this present time. And in fact, in the verse before this, we're told that creation will be liberated from its bondage to decay, which means that since the fall, everything, including DNA, has been decaying, which is exactly what scientists see happening. An honest interpretation of what scientists know about DNA actually confirms the biblical account of creation and the fall. Again, real science supports the biblical account. We Christians, we don't have to avoid talking about science. We can have confidence in the Bible as the inerrant word of God. It is true in everything it teaches from the very first verse. And you know what? We should be out there proclaiming this fact to the world. Unfortunately, this is a very rare occurrence today. Too often as a ministry, we have people come up to us and they say things like, oh, isn't creation just a side issue? Aren't we Christians just called to reach out to the lost, to evangelize and preach the gospel? You know what? To most unbelievers, this is not a side issue. This is the very reason they don't believe. But more than that, the Genesis account of creation is absolutely foundational to the gospel message we preach. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul refers to Genesis, and he reminds us that death was a result of Adam's rebellion. And then he highlights the gospel connection. For since death came through a man, The resurrection of the dead comes also through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. Now, please don't get me wrong here. I am not saying that what we believe about creation is a salvation issue. It's not. We are saved by grace through faith. But how we interpret Genesis is foundational to understanding why we need to be saved in the first place. See, when we call into question the reliability of the facts of Genesis, we are effectively taking away the foundation of the whole gospel message. This can and does become a salvation issue for those that we are sharing the gospel message with. And Jesus himself warns us of the consequences. In the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, Abraham tells the rich man, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. We are living in a society that has swallowed whole the lie of evolution in millions of years. Our schools, our universities, the media, and sadly even many of our Christian churches are effectively teaching people that Moses got it wrong. And if Moses can't be trusted, how can we trust the rest of the Bible? Is it any wonder that so many people reject the gospel message? What I'd like to do now, just very quickly, is this is something that's come out recently, and I just want to show you some statistics that are very relevant to this topic. The New Zealand Bible Society, they just recently released their 2022-2023 Bible Engagement Survey. One of the questions, they asked a lot of questions. One they asked is, would you describe yourself as a Christian? And the results were fascinating. Ages 13 to 14, 38% of young people in this country would say that they were Christian. 15 to 18, 46%. And then something happens. 19 to 24, it drops to 14%. And I would suggest there's a lot of people in this room would have children they would be looking at that statistic saying, yeah, I know that's happened to my kids. But what's happened here? See, 13 through to 18, these young people are in our schools. They're being taught things like evolution in millions of years. They're still saying that they would describe themselves as Christian. What happens when they get to 18? They leave home. And all of a sudden, they're outside of the protective environment of the home. And they're challenged on their faith. And we're sending them out, and they're not prepared for the challenges that they're going to face. Now, Creation Ministries, we decided to take the research a little bit further to see if we could identify why so many young people are abandoning their faith. We sent a crew onto university campuses in Atlanta, in Georgia. This is America's Bible Belt. Apparently, there are more churches in the Atlanta region than in the whole of Australia. And as the students walked past, our interviewer asked 4 questions. Firstly, were you raised in the church? If they said no to this question, then we let them go. We were only interested in young people who were raised in Christian homes. We ended up with a sample of just over 100 young people answered yes to this question. We then asked, creation or evolution, which is true? Of the students surveyed, just 5 believed in biblical creation. The rest said evolution. These were kids raised in Christian homes, in the church. We then asked, did your parents, your pastors, or anyone give you information that showed you that biblical creation might be true? All 5 that still believed in biblical creation had been shown information. Every single one of the students who believed in evolution, I am getting the words right the way around here, aren't I? The ones who still believed in biblical creation said they had been shown information. Every single one of the students who believed in evolution said they had never been shown any information at all. In fact, some of them laughed. What information? There is no information. And then the last question, are you still attending church? Of the kids who believed in evolution, only 1 still attended church. We've left him in the documentary just to show that we're not fudging the results. And you can see this documentary for free on YouTube, by the way. But here's the good news. Of the 5 who were equipped with information, all of them still faithfully attended church. See, the creation-evolution issue is the major issue facing the church today. And as you can see, information on this topic really does make a difference. But not just for people who already have a faith. Information like this changes lives, and I know because it changed mine. I was raised in a Christian home, but my family never really took the Bible seriously. In fact, my mother was a science teacher. She taught and believed in evolution in millions of years. When I left home and went to university, when I hit 18, went to university, I found it very easy to abandon my faith. And that's what I did. And as a result, I spent 20 wasted years as an atheist. Today, I'm a biblical creationist. Why? Because somebody took the time to share information with me that showed me that the biblical account could be trusted and set me on the path to where I am today. Information on this topic is key to being able to communicate the relevance of the Christian faith in today's society. Do you guys understand that there's a battle going on for the souls of your family and friends? There's a war raging, and these issues, evolution in millions of years, are a huge stumbling block to them believing that the Bible might even be remotely true. Do you ever get the feeling that your family, friends might think you're a little bit crazy? Wouldn't it be great to be able to show them that you're not? To show them that in the beginning God really did create the heavens and the earth, and that the glory of his creation is plain for all to see, so that they, like us, are without excuse, and then to see them come to faith. Now, I've only had a short time with you today. There are so many more topics and questions that people in our culture have that challenge a straightforward reading of the Bible. We need to have answers. Now, I'm going to put my hand up here and admit that I'm the sort of person who remembers about 10% of a talk like this for about 10 minutes, and then it's gone. It might be different when Aubrey's preaching, but if you go over a talk, over a sermon more than once, or you do some follow-up reading, some research, do you remember it better? Do you understand it better? Of course you do. When you came in, you would have seen that we have resources on the tables out there. Am I here to sell you books? Yes, I am, but not because we make money on them, okay? We are a donation-funded ministry. People, mums and dads around the world and around the country, like yourselves, support us on a regular basis. And this allows us to come into churches to present a message like this. And it also allows us to do the research, prepare the resources to put into your hands. Why? Because we have a prayer and a vision to see an army of believers who will go out into their neighborhood, speak to their neighbors who've been raised on this idea that evolution in millions of years is true. People who will raise up children and grandchildren who will do the same. So I hope you don't mind me being a little bit practical here, because we do need to be equipped. And I want to just share with you one resource where we've had more testimonies of people coming to faith than any other. And that's Creation Magazine. Does anybody here get this magazine?
Yeah, great magazine.
Yes, thank you. Talk to this man over here. He'll tell you how great it is. He's my marketing person. This is the most read publication of its kind in the world today. It comes out quarterly, so every 3 months there's a fresh injection of Bible-affirming, scientifically accurate information comes into your home. It's life-changing information, not just for you. Yes, it will strengthen your faith, but this can be life-changing information for those that you're trying to reach with the gospel message. And we've got a little incentive for you to get this information into your home today. If you sign up for a 1-year subscription, we'll start by giving you a back issue for free, so you get 5 issues for the cost of 4, so you can start reading straight away. And if you sign up for a multi-year subscription, each year is a little bit cheaper, and we have the back issue for you, plus there's a couple of free gifts for you as well.
And if you don't think it's value for money, I will refund.
Would you like to come with me? Okay. So I'm going to get my wonderful, handsome assistant to hand out sign-up sheets for Creation Magazine. When the form gets to you, all you need to do is fill in your details in the spaces provided. Please make sure you tell us which option you've chosen, and then just take the sheet off the clipboard and take it to the back later on to get your free gifts and to make payment. This is an incredibly easy to use evangelism tool. We live next door to a Chinese family, and when we finish reading our magazine, we give it to the Chinese family next door, and I know that their eldest son reads it because we've had some discussions on it. Oh, and it's a great idea. You can actually use this as a gift for believers and unbelievers as well. And if you decide that you'd like to give a gift, there's a tick box on the front, and there's room for address details on the back. Okay. So while those are going around, I just want to look at another couple of the scientific questions that we can be asked. First of all, what about the dinosaurs? How do we explain dinosaurs that are supposedly millions of years old? You know what? We don't have to. In the mid-1990s, a graduate student by the name of Mary Schweitzer she actually found soft tissue in an unfossilized T-Rex bone. Listen to what she said. She said it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course, I couldn't believe it. The bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? The answer is they can't. Everything we know about experimental biology, chemistry, and physics tells us that it's impossible. But in recent years, Dr. Schweitzer and others have made some astonishing discoveries in dinosaur fossils. They found bone cells, they found fragile proteins, they found DNA, they found vessels that are still elastic. You can stretch them out, and when you let them go, they snap back. And these vessels are full of contents that you can squeeze out. This is in dinosaur fossils that are supposedly 65 million years old at least. You know, this was a surprise to us creationists with our 4,500 years since the flood, but it's absolutely catastrophic to the long-age evolutionary worldview. And here's one more for you. Where do all the races come from? You know, this is a huge topic in the world today. And this question actually highlights a logical but unpleasant implication of the theory of evolution. If we all evolved from an ape-like ancestor, then it's highly likely that some people groups are more evolved than others. And what's the easiest way to distinguish between people groups? Skin color? So I have to ask you, how many different skin colors do you think there are? Okay, let's make it easier. If you had to describe me to the police, maybe you saw me going through somebody's handbag and I headed out through the back as fast as I can, which isn't very fast now, and you called the police and you had to describe me, how would you describe me? I'm old? Yes. I'm bald? Yes. I wear glasses and I am white? Yes. Twice now I've had people call out pasty. But am I really white? You know, when the police catch me, the New Zealand police, they always get their man, and I am not fast. When they catch me, they're going to take a mugshot of me, aren't they? They're going to stand me in front of a white screen. Is my face going to disappear into that white screen? No, it's not. Why? Because I have a pigment in my skin. It's called melanin, and it's dark brown. Every person on this planet has that same pigment. Some people have a little bit more of it. Some people, sadly, like me, have a little bit less of it. We all have the same pigment. We are all different shades of the same color. Now, if you've been subscribing to Creation Magazine, you would have seen this picture. Two-tone twins. These gorgeous girls have the same biological mother and father. Here they are as a family. The parents are mid-brown. And you know what? This is not an isolated case. There are many, many examples from around the world of twins with completely different skin tones. In fact, my atheist brother, I am working on it, and I'm making progress, by the way, but he pointed out that I grew up with two girls. One was very dark, one was very pale. They were twins. How does this happen? You know what? The better question is, why are we all so surprised? If we read the Bible as it's plainly written, we are all descended from Adam and Eve. How many races are there? Just one. It's called the human race. Okay, you've probably worked out that I could talk for millions of years on this topic, but that's all the science I've got time for. But what usually happens, I'm alone out at the table there today. What usually happens after a meeting like this is that people come up and the first thing they do is they ask a question. What have you got for somebody who's interested in? And then they put something in there. So what I want to do is just very quickly answer a few of the most asked questions there. If you're looking for a general overview, then I would recommend this book. It's called the Creation Answers book. It has answers to over 60 of the most asked questions on creation, evolution, and the Bible. It also comes with downloadable study guides. So you buy the book, download the study guides, and you can go through it in your family or with your home group. And if you want the book for free, then you get the intro pack, you get Refuting Evolution, the best-selling creation book of all time, apparently, apart from the Bible. You get a streaming DVD, and we also throw in the Answers book free of charge. We've got books that cover the age of the Earth. This is called Deep Time Deception. This goes into fossils, rocks, radiometric dating, the Ice Age, all sorts of other topics there. I won't talk about that one because I think I've just about sold out of them. We do also have a teaching series called Genesis Academy. This is 12 sessions, all about 20 or 30 minutes long. And this is great for your church, for your small groups, to go through Genesis from Genesis 1 to 11. Okay? If you don't have a DVD player, we also have this as a streaming option as well. It's usually $110, but out there it's $99. We have dinosaur books, and we also have children's books. And Noah's Ark, and the real Noah's Ark, not those stupid, silly bathtub arks that you see in most children's books. What does the Bible say? Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. And of course, there's a website. Oh, and the web address is? You see, real science works. Okay, as I said earlier, being prepared is an instruction, so I want to finish with another challenge, but this time it's a challenge from me to you. Which person are you going to be? Are you going to allow the world's interpretation of the scientific facts dampen your faith? Or will you equip yourself so that you can defend your faith, so that you can reach your friends, your workmates, and your culture with the truth of the gospel message? And what about the most important people in your lives? Are you prepared to provide that same protection for your children and your grandchildren? See, there are answers to the questions that unbelievers ask. This is an amazing time to be a Christian, and we should be making the most of it.